Rain pressed itself against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, like a desperate memory trying to come back. Manhattan's skyline shimmered behind the glass, but inside, the world was soundless, except for the faint rasp of a mop gliding over marble. Elena moved like a shadow through the gleaming hush of the corridor, her worn sneakers squeaking every few steps, but she didn't hear them. AirPods nestled in her ears, Mozart's Requiem swelling in a minor key. Her movements were instinctual, almost reverent, as if cleaning this palace in the clouds were a ritual, not a job. She polished the brass door handles without looking at them, wiped down the abstract sculptures without questioning why they were there. In the reflection of a mirrored wall, her own face startled her. Wet strands of black hair clinging to her cheeks, dark eyes tired but clear, like still water hiding a deep well of silence. She didn't know that on the other side of the glass, behind a partition designed to look like an art installation, Alexander Dane was watching her. The billionaire recluse who hadn't left the apartment in 5 weeks. The man the world whispered about in press releases and Wall Street forums, who once lit up cover pages and now was barely a rumor. He sat in a low chair, barefoot in dark sweatpants and a black t-shirt, his elbows on his knees, a whiskey glass in his hand untouched. His eyes, gray, storm-colored, watched her without moving, without blinking. It wasn't voyeurism. It was hunger. Not for her body, though she was beautiful in a way that made you ache quietly, but for something else. Something he couldn't name. She mopped the floor like it was an altar. She moved like she had purpose, while his billions had stripped him of his. Her presence scratched at the sealed vault of his solitude. Her back was to him now, and she started humming, not the tune in her ears, but something else, a melody from a village far away, a lullaby he'd never heard but suddenly needed to. Her voice was so low it was nearly lost in the rain. She cleaned the surface of a grand piano he hadn't touched in years. She didn't know the keys were real ivory, or that a symphony had once been composed on them. Her fingertips lingered on the edge of it. She looked around, carefully removed one AirPod, listened, then sat down on the bench as if drawn there by gravity, not desire. "You shouldn't be here," Alexander said quietly, his voice rusty from disuse. She froze. The spell broke. She stood up so fast the bench scraped against the floor. Her hand flew to her chest. The AirPod dropped. I didn't know anyone was. You're not fired," he said, standing now. He hadn't spoken to another person in days, and it felt like lifting a stone off his lungs. She blinked at him. He wasn't what she expected. His hair was unkempt, beard scruff softening a face that had once graced magazine spreads. But there was something frayed at the edges of him. "I'm sorry. I was just singing." He crossed the room slowly, as if unsure if the floor would hold him. "What was that song?" She looked down. Her cheeks flushed a soft pink. "It's from my childhood. A Moldovan lullaby. My grandmother used to sing it during storms." He nodded once. A silence opened between them, thick with the sound of rain, of breath, of two lives scraping past each other. "Why do you wear headphones while you clean?" he asked. She hesitated. "So I can be somewhere else." "And where do you go?" She looked up at him then, really looked, at the way his eyes didn't look away, the way he asked as if he meant it. "Away from here." The laugh that escaped him was short and bitter. "You and me both." She should have left then. Said thank you, bowed her head, walked out of the room like a ghost. But something rooted her to the floor. He walked to the piano, sat where she had been a moment before. His fingers hovered over the keys, but didn't touch them. "Play something," he said. "I can't," she replied, a step back. "I've never learned." "Doesn't matter." She looked at him for a moment longer, then, slowly, almost defiantly, walked back. Sat beside him, but didn't touch the piano. Instead, she whispered, "You're Alexander Dane." "I was," he said. She tilted her head. "What are you now?" His jaw tightened. He looked at her like she'd just asked him to bleed. "I'm trying to remember." And then, without knowing why, she reached out and placed her hand gently on top of his. His fingers, stiff at first, curled under hers. The rain eased. The silence between them became something else. A pause. A breath. A beginning. But not a clean one. Because as the storm outside cleared, another gathered just beneath the surface. Behind Elena's quiet resilience was a story she had buried beneath every floor she scrubbed, and Alexander, who had spent years building empires and then tearing them down, had no idea that the girl who cleaned his floors with Mozart in her ears might be the only person who could save him. Or destroy him. His fingers rested beneath hers, still as stone but pulsing faintly with a heat that startled them both. For a moment they remained like that, two strangers stitched together by silence, skin to skin over ivory keys that had forgotten what music felt like. Then, slowly, as if afraid of waking something fragile, Elena withdrew her hand and stood. Her voice, when it came, was low, almost hoarse. "I have to finish cleaning." He didn't try to stop her. Didn't move. Just sat there, staring at the keys, long after she left the room, like smoke slipping under a door. The scent of citrus cleaner and lavender oil trailed behind her. When the elevator doors finally shut behind her at the end of her shift, she leaned against the mirrored paneling and exhaled the breath she'd held since hearing his voice. Her reflection stared back, eyes sharp with a question she hadn't formed yet. She didn't sleep that night. Not well. The lullaby looped in her head, its melody now tied not to her grandmother's hands, but to his eyes, eyes that hadn't flinched when he said he was trying to remember who he was. And in her tiny room in Queens, tucked between a laundromat and a discount pharmacy, she sat on the edge of her bed, and tried not to wonder why it had felt like she was trying to remember too. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, Alexander sat at the piano until dawn blurred the skyline into blue ash. He didn't drink. Didn't eat. He stared at the keys. Once, he had played like it was breathing. Then came the lawsuits, the death of his brother, the scandal, the silence. He hadn't touched music since the trial. But now there was a handprint on the edge of the piano lid, just the ghost of it, left by the girl with the headphones who sang lullabies to herself while she scrubbed his regrets. He didn't know her name. Not yet. The next day, she came back. She always did. Rain had been replaced by a blistering sun, and the city steamed under it like an animal trying to sweat off its guilt. Elena arrived with a ponytail, and a dull ache in her stomach she blamed on bad coffee, but knew was something else. The doorman nodded. The elevator climbed. When the doors opened, the apartment was too quiet. She stepped inside. No sign of him. She moved faster than usual, eyes flicking toward the dark hallway that led to the music room. She didn't mean to look. Didn't mean to care. But when she passed the piano, a single sheet of music lay on it. Her name was written in pencil at the top, Elena. She stared. Her chest felt tight. She hadn't told him. No one had. And it wasn't just her name. It was a melody. 4 bars. Simple. Like a question with no punctuation. She picked it up, held it like it might burn her fingers. "You read music?" His voice came from the shadows. She turned. He was barefoot again, dressed in a crisp shirt this time, sleeves rolled. He looked almost human. "No," she said. "Not really." He stepped into the light. His eyes never left hers. "I heard the lullaby again. Last night. It wouldn't leave me alone." She held up the paper. "You wrote this?" "I tried." "Why?" A long pause. "Because I wanted to understand why your voice sounded like remembering." A silence unfolded between them that felt too naked to stay in. She set the music down. "You shouldn't be watching me." "I wasn't watching," he said calmly. "I was listening." The distinction hung in the air like fog. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned back to work, the vacuum cord trailing behind her like a tail she couldn't shake. But the mood had shifted. The apartment felt smaller, warmer, more dangerous. Over the next few weeks, it became a rhythm. She cleaned. He watched less. Talked more. left things out. Books he used to read, records he used to love. Music began to play through speakers again, never loud, always old. Debussy, Nina Simone, a little Miles Davis. Once, she caught him sketching something. His hands smudged with charcoal, his eyes narrowed like he was trying to capture something running away from him. She never asked what. He never offered. But the paper with her name on it stayed by the piano. Then one Tuesday, she came in to find the piano gone. A space like an absence remained, the rug slightly darker where it had stood. Her chest tightened. She didn't realize she'd said it out loud. "What happened?" "It was in the wrong place," he said from behind her, tying back his hair. "Now it's in the music room." "There is no music room." "There is now." She followed him down a hall she'd never cleaned, into a room that had been sealed shut with a velvet rope like some museum artifact. He opened it. Inside, a piano, a faded couch, a wall of soundproofing panels, and windows facing west. The sun poured in. "You're rebuilding," she said quietly. "Maybe," he answered. Then, as if it pained him, "But I can't do it alone." She hesitated. "What do you think I am?" "I don't know yet," he said. "But when you sing, I remember things I didn't know I'd forgotten." Her voice dropped. "I'm just a housemaid." He stepped closer, almost sharply. "No, you're not. You're the only person in this place who doesn't look at me like I'm already ruined." She looked up at him, eyes burning. "Maybe that's because I'm ruined too." And there it was. The fracture. The unspoken turning in the air. Neither of them moved. The silence roared. And then, from the hallway, a voice neither of them expected broke in. Sharp, female, cold. "You didn't tell me you'd hired a singer." A woman stood in the doorway, dressed in black like a widow at her third funeral. High cheekbones. Diamond earrings. Her eyes locked on Elena, then flicked to Alexander with a practiced kind of smile. "How interesting," she said. He didn't greet her. Just muttered, "Catherine." Elena took a step back. Catherine didn't. "Your new muse, Alex?" she asked sweetly. "How original." "She's not. Oh, spare me," she cut in. "She's lovely. You always had a type." Elena turned to leave, but Catherine stopped her with a look. "You should be careful," she said gently. "He breaks his toys." Alexander's voice was sharp enough to bleed. "That's enough." "Is it?" Catherine said, but she was already gliding back down the hall. Her heels made no sound. Elena stared at him. "Who was she?" He looked tired suddenly. Years heavier. "My ex-wife." Her breath caught. "She still has a key? She still owns a third of this place." He didn't look at her. Not quite. "She's not here for me. She's here to see what I'm building." "And what are you building?" she asked, voice flat. "A life," he said. "Something that doesn't collapse when someone leaves the room." She nodded once hard, picked up her bucket. "Then maybe I shouldn't be in it." He took a step forward. "Elena," but she was already walking away, faster than before, her headphones back in, the world turned off again. Mozart? This time Lacrimosa. The heat came early that week, the kind that makes the city throb and sweat, bleeding steam from every vent and crack like it's trying to purge itself. Elena hadn't returned in 3 days. Not a message. Not a word. The vacuum still sat where she'd last left it, near the edge of the Persian rug that was older than both of them. Alexander walked past it every morning, like someone grieving a person not quite dead. He didn't call her. Didn't try. Instead, he worked. Feverishly. The music room filled with unfinished pieces, chords scrawled on napkins, melody lines taped to the walls like evidence in a cold case. He played, rewrote, ripped pages in half. His fingers were raw. Blistered. Once, late at night, he screamed at the keys and shattered a lamp. But still he kept going. He stopped drinking. Started running, every morning, before the sun turned the pavement into fire. He returned soaked, trembling, but more alert. Like pain was fuel. Catherine came back twice. Uninvited, as always. "You look alive," she said the second time, flipping through his sheet music like it was junk mail. "I'd almost forgotten how inconvenient that is." He ignored her. Or tried. But she lingered near the piano, her eyes resting on one page in particular, the one with Elena's name still written in pencil. "She'll cost you everything," she said softly. "Girls like that always do." "She's not a girl," he said without looking up. "She's more grown than you ever were." Her hand struck like a whip across his face, fast and clean. She stared at him. Not with fury. With something closer to grief. "You have no idea what's coming, do you?" He didn't answer. And she left, just like that, the door clicking shut behind her like a final nail. Later that week, he got the letter. Hand-delivered. Gold seal. Thick paper. Elegant like a knife. His lawyers had warned him. Catherine was making her move. Reviving the dormant suit. Claiming mental instability. Leverage for full control of the Dane Foundation. She had signatures, statements. A psych report from the worst months. Photos from the fallout. The trial that had nearly destroyed him. His brother's suicide. The wrongful death suit. The media's feeding frenzy. She wanted it all dragged back into light. He was stunned at first. Not angry. Not broken. Just quiet. Then came the roar. He fired 2 lawyers. Hired one no one had dared to touch. Amari Lang, a legal surgeon with no patience for legacy or lies. "This won't be clean," she said during their first meeting, tapping the folder of documents like it was a landmine. "She'll go for the throat. And she knows where you bleed." "I know," he said, almost gently. "I want to bleed the right way this time." He started therapy again. Real therapy. Not the concierge kind, but with a sharp-eyed Polish woman in a 6th-floor office that smelled like cigarettes and grief. He talked. About guilt. About music. About failure. About Elena. "She made me remember who I was before I started building cages for myself," he said one morning, voice thin. "And now she's gone. Maybe," the therapist said, "she's giving you the silence to find out if you were really listening." Meanwhile, Elena didn't sleep. She cleaned other people's homes, but it felt like going through the motions inside someone else's dream. She sang less. Avoided mirrors. When she passed a piano in a subway station, her hands twitched. She didn't touch it. She couldn't. Her uncle called, her only family left in the States. He said her name had shown up in an article. Buried in gossip, but there. "The housemaid who sings to billionaires," it said. She felt sick. Her landlord raised her rent. The school where she cleaned floors part-time said they'd be reviewing staff alignments. She knew what it meant. She didn't answer Alexander's email when it finally came. She read it. 4 sentences. Asterisk, I understand now. You are the only one not asking for something. Please let me hear your voice again. I'm building something and it's incomplete without you. Asterisk, she deleted it. Then rewrote it from memory on a napkin at 3 a.m. and cried until dawn. The day of the pretrial hearing arrived wrapped in thunderclouds. Reporters lined the courthouse steps. Catherine stepped out of her car in black silk, flawless. She offered no statement. Alexander arrived alone. No entourage. No bodyguards. Just him and a briefcase of proof that he wasn't broken, not anymore. That he could stand upright in a storm without crumbling. But just before he walked inside, a voice behind him stopped everything. "You forgot your foundation." He turned. Elena. Standing in the rain without an umbrella, soaked, her hair clinging to her face, her eyes locked on his like they hadn't looked away in weeks. He stared at her. Openly. His breath caught. "Why are you here?" "Because you didn't break me," she said. "And I want to make sure she doesn't break you." Something unspooled in his chest then. Something cold and coiled that had been tightening for years. He nodded once. She stepped beside him. They walked through the doors together. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed. The gallery was half full. Catherine sat poised like royalty waiting to reclaim a throne. But her smile faltered when she saw Elena take a seat behind Alexander, not beside him. Just behind. As if to say, asterisk, I'm not your scandal. I'm his spine. Asterisk, the judge entered. Papers shuffled. Voices echoed. And then it began. Not the final war, but the last great storm before the fire. The courtroom was quiet in that strange way that only happens when something larger than language has just passed through it, like a storm that takes its voice with it. Catherine didn't look at him when it was over. She adjusted the sleeve of her dress, stood, and walked out as if she were leaving a salon, not a courtroom where she'd just lost her final claim to the house, the foundation, the man she had once shared grief with like oxygen. Alexander didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He just exhaled, one long breath that left him slightly slumped, like the architecture inside him had finally settled. He walked down the courthouse steps alone. No cameras followed. They'd moved on to newer meat. Elena wasn't there. She'd left the gallery halfway through the final argument, when she realized he didn't need her to carry him anymore. He'd stood on his own, tired, imperfect, but whole. She hadn't said goodbye. Just touched his shoulder on the way out, soft and brief, the way people do when words are too blunt for what they mean. Months passed. The apartment changed. Rugs removed. Walls painted. He sold the piano, not out of bitterness, but because it no longer belonged to this version of him. He kept only the music room. It became a quiet place, full of plants and light, and shelves of blank notebooks. He wrote now. Not music, not always. Letters, fragments, scenes. Sometimes entire days captured in detail, so he wouldn't forget who he was becoming. The lullaby remained, recorded once on a handheld mic, played back only on nights when he needed to hear how memories sounded. Elena moved to the coast. Oregon. She took a job teaching music in a community school where the pianos were chipped and half the kids couldn't afford lunch, but they sang like they believed it would save them. She lived in a studio apartment with a wide window and a second-hand record player. She walked to work. Didn't wear headphones anymore. One afternoon in late fall, a letter came. No return address, but she knew the handwriting. Inside, a single page. No explanation. Just a few bars of melody. Her name still written at the top. Below it, in faint pencil, for the days when silence is heavier than sound. She folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer where she kept old photos and pieces of fabric from her grandmother's dresses. That night, she stood at the front of her class and sang the lullaby again, this time not to remember, but to release. And in the city, on the rooftop of a building that used to feel like a mausoleum, Alexander leaned back in a metal chair, eyes closed, letting the wind carry something away. Below, the traffic sighed. A single plant bloomed in a cracked pot beside him, stubborn and green. The sky shifted above like an eyelid fluttering before sleep. And somewhere far from each other, they both understood at the same time. Some songs are not meant to be finished. Only returned to now and then, in the quiet between storms.